Polandleyski. First, on behalf of the family, I want to say thank you for everyone who came here and who made the trip. Seeing faces from far distances, Florida, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Arizona and Texas, Tennessee. Thank you so much. It means a lot to my mom and to our family to see you all. And to Father Vasil and Father Petro and St. Andrew's parishioners, thank you. Дуже дякую. That was the Ukrainian Mass my dad always wanted. And it means, again, so much to us. The family would like to invite everyone to the Knights of Columbus Hall afterwards. We have lots of food, lots of drink, and stories to share. It's at 5961 Newman Court, off of Faro, so please join us afterwards to help us celebrate the life of my dad. The last time I spoke on his behalf, I gave a toast at his 65th birthday. It caused controversy, and I was surprised my mom asked me to speak today. But Mom, I will not give the toast. Sorry, Dad, I know you wanted to hear it one more time. My Tata always wanted people to know that death was a part of life, and we move on. I'm not sure how much he would want me to speak on his behalf. I think he would rather we all go to the hall and start having shots in his honor. And he would raise his glass and say, "Are you with us or are you against us?" And that was my dad. The last few years, he suffered from dementia and blindness and deafness, and it was like watching a light go out. And now I think he's free, because after he passed, I started getting messages. People started sharing stories, and we saw videos of the man he used to be, the light of the party, the funny guy, always trying to make everyone feel welcome. And I think that's the Tato we'd like you all to remember. When I was growing up, I really had mixed feelings about my dad, because he could be so generous and friendly and fun, but he could also be mean and quick to temper. And at times I felt unfair to my mom and to my brother Toss. And I struggled with that, trying to figure out how could he be both. And 30 years ago this month, I was honored to be able to go back to Ukraine and then to his village with him. And I learned so much about who he was and where he had come from. And I want to share some of that with you. When my dad was born in 1933, his father had been injured in a coal mine accident. Someone had lit dynamite and didn't tell him to run, and it blew up and it injured him, and he lived this miserable life for another year before he passed, while my dad was still an infant. So my dad never knew his father. He never had a father figure. His mother, Paraska, at that time now had 6 children, 6 young children, and she herself was an immigrant from Lemkivshchina. And so she thought, I will take the family back to Lemkivshchina, to my homeland, and try to raise them there. There's a story we heard later in his life, where on the boat going back to Lemkivshchina, there was an American family looking at my grandmother with these 6 young children and feeling sorry for her. And the story goes, they offered to buy my dad from her. And I think how much different his life would have been had my grandmother just taken the easy way out. They landed in a town in their village of Vizichani, and my dad grew up on a small farm. And he worked, even as a little kid, in the fields with the cow. There was a horse. There wasn't a lot. Oftentimes their dinners were in a single bowl where they would all reach in and take what they could. And my dad, being one of the smallest, was always one of the last to eat. His brother Sam was a bit of a bully, I hear. When my dad was about 6 or 7 years old, World War II broke out. and there were more difficult years ahead. There was a camp up the road from their village where, as they were deporting Jewish people to the camps, there was a transit camp there where they would stop, and these people would have been traveling for days with little to eat, and his mother Paraska would take them by the hand with some loaves of bread, and they would walk, and they had not much themselves, but they would throw the bread over the fence just to help these people, give them a few bites to eat as they went on their journey. When I was in Visakhani with them, we would walk, and he would show me, now Visakhani is in this beautiful valley, and he would show me how the artillery would fire over the village from one mountaintop to another. And he took me to the trail he was walking on as a little boy when the artillery would land in the trees above him. And he says he ran so fast, he thought every step would be his last, but he made it safely home. The village church was burning one night from the artillery, and a villager went to put the fire out, and a Russian soldier stopped him and said, "If you do that, I will shoot you." And so they stood, the villagers, and they watched their village church burn down. And when the war ended, life did not get any easier for my dad and his family. After the war, the Ukrainians had Ukrainian partisans trying to become independent so they could have their own country. And the communists, the Russians and the Polish communists would hunt them in my dad's village. And there would be sabotage. There was a railroad bridge behind their house. Sometimes the partisans would blow that up at the night. And so the soldiers were always looking for these partisans. And when my dad was about 13 or 12 or 13, he was stopped by a patrol, and they sat him on a hand grenade to ask him where the partisans were. And they told him if he lied, that hand grenade would blow up. And I can't imagine the fear that went through him as he sat there thinking, what does he say? One night, there was a commotion where a army truck had pulled up to their house, and they had a traditional Lemko house where they lived in this third. The stores and equipment was in the middle, and then the barn was on the end of the house. And when they came out, there were Russian soldiers taking a cow, their only cow that gave them milk. And his mom, Paraska, started challenging the soldiers. Why are you doing this to us? And one of them took off his rifle and started shooting at her as she ran through the house. And all he saw was his mom being chased by a soldier and gunshots. And he thought she had been killed, but she went through the back window and was laying in the snow outside hiding from them. And then finally, there was a village next to his, Zavatka Morokivska. And one night the soldiers came and they massacred the villagers, dozens and dozens. And Paraska took my dad by the hand, a 12-year-old, in through the snow, and he saw the bodies and he saw the blood. And she told him, Yelko, you cannot forget what you've seen here. You must tell people so they remember. And when I was with him in 1992, we're in this field, and he looked at me and he said, Jamie, you must make sure people remember what happened here. And so, Dio, I've done it. Shortly after that, his family was rounded up with other Lemko families, and they were deported to the northwest of Poland. They were given just an hour to pack, and then put on a truck and then a train and deported. They were dropped in a field surrounded by barbed wire, and that's where they were to make their life before moving into a house. And luckily, his mother was able to bring out their old passport so they could come back to the U.S. And in October 1947, they made the return trip. Not the whole family. His older brother was kept behind because he was of military age. His stepfather and sister, Irka, were kept behind for, I believe it was another 20 years before they were allowed to immigrate. They settled in Pottsville, and life was still pretty tough because even though he was born in America, he was raised overseas, so he was treated as a foreigner. He was picked on, he was made fun of. They would throw stones at him and his brother when they would walk to school. He tells a story about in school, when the Germans occupied the village, he was in 3rd or 4th grade, and then the Russians came and they said, oh, the Germans didn't teach you good enough, you're going to go to 3rd grade again. And then when he came to America, they said, oh, the Russians didn't teach you good enough, you're going to go to 3rd grade again. So he did 3rd grade 3 times, and he was the biggest kid in the classroom.